Alright guys, I am back with another art conservation video. It's been a hot minute since I've done one of these art conservation videos, so I'm really happy to be back in the saddle to talk to you about my master's degree subject. So, you know, something that I feel like I know a lot about, that I probably don't know a lot about, but that's what most master's degrees prepare you for anyway, so I think I'm on the right track. Today we are talking about the principle of reversibility and why this concept is so important when working in conservation and with treating objects. The principle of reversibility is one of the main tenets in the Church of Conservation, let's call it. It's even written in the American Institute of Conservation Code of Ethics, and I'm going to read the article to you now to tell you exactly what it says, but on the AIC website they use the pronoun he. But because it is 2019 and because most of the conservators I know are not men, they are women, I'm going to use the much nicer overarching general term of they. The conservator is guided by and endeavors to apply the principle of reversibility in their treatments. They should avoid the use of materials which may become so intractable that their future removal could endanger the physical safety of the object. They also should avoid the use of techniques, the results of which cannot be undone if that should become desirable. Essentially, we want to do our best to only use materials that we can remove afterwards, just in case the materials are aging badly, or the restoration turns out weird, or there's a technical difficulty, or if the material becomes unstable over time. Not to mention that more appropriate, maybe safer materials may be developed and introduced into the market further on into the future. So the option of removing an older material to replace it with a new, safer, better material should always be there, or at least should be thought of when approaching the treatment of an object. We also might find something out about the object as time goes by, in which case we'll have to revisit it and retreat it in maybe a different way because new information has come out about this object. Like, for example, maybe we interpreted the object as one thing and then 50 years from now we figured out that, you know, maybe it's not this one thing, maybe it's another thing, and therefore we need to treat it accordingly to make sure that the object is presented correctly. Conservation is all about minimal interference. We don't want to add our own narrative or interpretation into the object, we just want to protect its integrity. Of course, this is obviously philosophically impossible because every decision that we make, every sort of thought process we have will kind of impart our own ideas and beliefs onto the object, and of course we're not always able to use completely reversible materials, but at least the notion is still there and it's the thought that counts, or at least that's what they tell me. The concept and the thought process behind reversibility is what sets conservators apart from restorers or repairers. We want to make sure that our interventions can be undone, and that right there is the intent that we set when planning out the treatment of an object. We as conservators have an obligation to ensure that the condition of an object doesn't change for a long time after its initial treatment. But we also have to ensure that if the condition does change, that we can go in, remove the treatments that we have done to make room for better, more stable treatments in the future if anything does happen. And let's not forget about aesthetics when we're talking about reversibility. Tastes, you know, can change over time. Fashion changes, your taste changes, everything like that. And the taste can change on how we also present an object to the public. You can see this throughout history if you're looking at even how objects were displayed within museums over the last 100 years. You can even look at how the objects were seen or really approached. It's all changed in the last 50, 60 years, and it's still continually changing. For example, in the past it was very common to fill in all losses in a ceramic pot. Like, even if they weren't structural or anything, or if they didn't need it really, they were filling them in to create a whole pot, to make a whole profile, to make it look brand new. You'd even paint over the whole fill to make it look hidden, to make sure no one really saw these cracks or these holes within the fabric. You can look at a lot of them, for example, on Greek vases. If you look really, really closely, you'll see that there's these huge areas that aren't original. You can see that. Everyone thinks, oh wow, big Greek vase, it came out of the ground looking like this. It did not. And today, if you look at them, we're seeing more of a trend to show the missing pieces within the vessel. Of course, if it's structural, we do add a fill to make sure it's stable, but it gives you a more realistic view of what the object looks like today without really affecting the readability too much. But also, the old way of restoring these pots to completion is already seen as too much intervention. In this case, it's very important that the old restorations can be removed without posing any risk to the original material, so that way we can retreat it again in today's fashion, let's say. And of course, when looking at conservation, we have to really admit that, yeah, not every conservation effort can be reversible. Sometimes a reversible material for the job at hand just isn't available, or sometimes the reversible material that we can use isn't suitable for the project because it's either not strong enough or it can't be used properly to protect the object. And sometimes the object itself is just too weak and we need something stronger, something more robust in order to make sure that the object retains its integrity. For example, we often use epoxy resins for glass restoration because the thicker reversible glues like Paraloid B72 can be too thick and not strong enough to bind these two pieces together. And yeah, epoxy resins suck to remove because they're really hard. They're a two-part hardener and they're not reversible, let's say, but it's the best bet that we have to make sure that the integrity of the object is held. Because as a conservator, the stability and the safety of the object is your #1 priority. We need to do the best we can with what we've got. Of course, you run through the list of reversible products first, but if none of them really fit, you have to compromise. You have to do what's best for the object. There are obviously some things that we do all the time as well that aren't reversible. For example, cleaning. We can't just like replace all the dust and the dirt that we've cleaned off the surface of an object. Cleaning is an essential part of conservation, but we need to make sure that we're being very careful and diligent when we're approaching the cleaning to make sure that we're not removing any original material, for example, or if it comes from an archaeological context, maybe there's something inside of the object or on the fabric that is indicative of its use or of its history that we need to keep on the object itself, which is also why we don't over clean a lot as well. You need to make sure that you have a good balance to make sure you're not removing all of its history. There's another term that kind of floats around up there when we talk about reversibility, and that is retreatability. This word is becoming a little bit more common than reversible because reversible can get a little bit controversial. Of course, once you interfere with an object, you can never sort of return it back to its original state. So this term of retreatability kind of covers all of your bases in a more legal sense than the word reversibility would. You know, for example, if you've consolidated something, you know, you've really penetrated the surface or the whole object with a material to make sure that it's stable, you can't really pull out all of that consolidation again. That's stuck in there, right? And yes, maybe you're using a reversible material like Paraloid B72, but once it's impregnated into an object, it's very difficult to get it back out again. But that's also sort of a good thing, as long as it's a good, stable material, because it obviously needed consolidating in the first place. So this intervention was something that was needed, even if it isn't completely reversible, let's say. So there you have it, friends, the minefield that is discussing reversibility and retreatability. Now go forth, look at an object, get confused, have an existential crisis, and finally, treat those objects to the best of your ability. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Big ups to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to help support the YouTube channel to make it grow, go ahead and become a patron on Patreon. You get some really cool perks as well. The link to that is in my description below. Here be my socials. And as always, stay dirty, my friends.